Welcome to Hauntcore Vault. If you are ready for horror tales, you are in the right place. If you are new, please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to know where are you from and what time you are watching. Let's begin. Between 1978 and 1988, a quiet stretch along the Connecticut River Valley became the eerie hunting ground for a deadly predator. 7 women, abducted, stabbed, and left in remote wooded areas within a 50-mile radius, claimed their lives, and even today, the killer remains unidentified. October 24, 1978. 27-year-old Kathy Milliken heads to Chandler Brook Wetland to photograph birds. The next day, authorities find her body mere yards from where she was last seen, over 20 stab wounds inflicted on her neck and abdomen. July 25, 1981. 37-year-old college student Mary Elizabeth Critchley is last seen hitchhiking near the Mass Pike exit. Her remains are discovered 2 weeks later in Unity, New Hampshire. The cause of death is undetermined. May 30, 1984. 17-year-old Bernice Courtemanche vanishes on her way to see her boyfriend. Her body is found almost 2 years later along the Sugar River. She had been stabbed and her throat slit. July 20, 1984. Nurse Ellen Freed stops at a payphone late at night. She mentions a car that was circling the lot. She vanishes shortly after. In September 1985, her remains are found near where Bernice's body was discovered. Stab wounds confirmed. July 10, 1985. Eva Morse, a single mother, disappears while hitchhiking. Her body surfaces in April 1986, stabbed, her throat slit. She was found just 500 feet from where Mary Elizabeth's body was discovered 4 years prior. April 15, 1986. Linda Moore is at home alone in her residence in Saxtons River, Vermont. She's found murdered in her living room with 25 stab wounds. Evidence suggests she fought back. There are no signs of forced entry. January 10, 1987. Nurse Barbara Agnew's car is discovered abandoned at a rest stop during a snowstorm. Blood is found inside. 2.5 months later, her body is discovered 12 miles away. She had been stabbed repeatedly and bore defensive wounds. 7 victims, all found in remote wooded areas, most near dirt roads. Stab wounds were the common cause of death. None were sexually assaulted. The killer selected low-risk dump sites and operated with disturbing precision. Criminal psychologist John Philpin's analysis revealed a calculated and methodical killer. He controlled the scene, the body, and the victim, likely deriving power from seeing the resistance fade. August 6, 1888. 22-year-old Jane Borowski, 7 months pregnant, stops at a convenience store. A man approaches, asks if the payphone works, then violently stabs her 27 times. Incredibly, Jane survives, managing to crawl into her car and drive to a friend's house. Both she and her unborn child live. Under hypnosis, she describes the attack in detail and remembers part of the attacker's license plate, 662. The vehicle, a 1975 to 1985 Jeep Wagoneer. Authorities pull 1,350 Wagoneer registrations from New England, but the lead goes nowhere. Philpin's profile suggests the killer was a loner, hostile towards women, comfortable driving long distances. He didn't stalk victims for long, he seized opportunities. The violence was about control, not sexual gratification. Several suspects emerged over the years. Michael Nicolau was a Vietnam vet and former helicopter pilot. He lived in the area, had access to mental health facilities, and matched Jane's description closely. He also had a violent history. Jane almost identified him, but DNA evidence was inconclusive. Delbert Tallman confessed to the murder of Bernice Courtemanche, but later recanted. Gary Westover, a paraplegic, allegedly confessed on his deathbed that he was involved in Barbara Agnew's murder, suggesting he was used as bait. The claim remains unverified. Rodney Stanger murdered a woman in Florida and resembled the profile, but Jane Borowski did not recognize him. An unnamed suspect was identified posthumously by his son, who believed his father was the killer. The father's wife reportedly suffered nightmares and feared he was behind the killings. But again, no official charges, no closure. As recently as 2024, investigators searched a property in Newport, New Hampshire, tied to a long-standing suspect. Yet still, no arrest. Some investigators believe the cases may not be fully connected, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Decades have passed. 7 victims, 1 survivor, and countless unanswered questions. Is the Connecticut River Valley Killer still out there? Or was he caught for another crime, never knowing he was being hunted? Until evidence is found, the darkness still lingers in the valley. You know, sometimes the most chilling cases are the ones that don't make sense at first glance. This is one of those. In October 2000, Houston, Texas was rocked by the deaths of 2 women, both named Mary Morris, and they were found dead just days apart. Same name, same city, similar make and model of car, different lives, but their stories were tragically intertwined. First, there was Mary Lou Morris, a 48-year-old bank loan officer, a dependable mom and wife. On the morning of October 12th, she left home for work like she always did, but she never showed up. Later that day, her car was found torched on a lonely stretch of rural road. Inside the burned-out shell was her body, so badly damaged that only her tooth fragments could confirm her identity. No obvious enemies, no signs of robbery. It made no sense. Then, just 3 days later, authorities found Mary McGinnis Morris, age 39, also deceased in her car, in another remote area just a few miles away. She'd been beaten and shot, and someone tried to stage it as a suicide. But investigators found the signs of struggle. It was clear she'd fought back. At her clinic, things had been odd. Her desk in disarray, and a chilling message on a male coworker's desk that read, "Death to her." She'd even asked her husband for a gun, and he placed it under her seat for protection. It was all so eerie. 2 women with the same name, killed days apart, found in their cars in secluded spots. Were they connected, or was it the most unbelievable coincidence? Some people think it was a hit gone wrong. Maybe someone intended to kill Mary McGinnis, and the wrong Mary was killed first. Mary Lou's wedding ring was missing, which some say is like a hitman's proof of a job done. And there was an anonymous tip tacked onto an article that said, "They got the wrong Mary Morris." But police haven't confirmed that call ever happened, and officially, they say the 2 cases aren't linked. Still, with those similarities, people, and especially the families, have a hard time believing it's just random chance. For Mary McGinnis, investigators looked at suspects, her coworker who had made threats, and even her husband. He refused a lie detector test, hired an attorney immediately, and did something strange. He called his wife's cell phone around the time she died. And get this, months later, a girl in Galveston used Mary Lou's phone card, found in a purse no one in the family recognized. Yet, despite all this and all the suspicion, no one's ever been charged in either murder. The police list both cases as unsolved. This story, it's one of those you can't shake. 2 women, same name, both killed in nearly the exact same way, and not one person brought to justice. Imagine living in a quiet little town where your biggest concerns are your neighbor's gossip, the school board, and the usual small-town politics. Now imagine that suddenly someone starts sending you letters, anonymous, personal, and threatening. They know everything about your life. things no one else should know. That's what happened in Circleville, Ohio. It started in the late 1970s. Residents began receiving strange letters, postmarked from nearby Columbus, but with no return address, no name, and no fingerprints. These weren't just angry rants, they were detailed. They revealed secrets, alleged affairs, criminal activity, personal habits, and they made threats. The first major target was Mary Gillespie, a local school bus driver. The letters accused her of having an affair with the school superintendent. At first, she dismissed them, but then her husband, Ron, started getting letters too. The tone escalated. Whoever was writing them didn't just want to gossip, they wanted control. One night, Ron reportedly got a phone call that upset him. He grabbed his gun and drove off, telling his kids he was going to confront the letter writer. Moments later, his truck was found crashed into a tree. He was dead, killed by a single gunshot. The gun had fired once, and just like that, the whispers turned deadly. But the letters didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. Years later, while driving her bus route, Mary noticed an obscene sign posted along the road. She stopped to tear it down, only to find it was a trap. Behind the sign was a box rigged with a pistol, ready to fire if she pulled the sign too hard. Thankfully, it misfired. Authorities traced the gun back to Paul Freshour, Mary's brother-in-law. He claimed it had been stolen from his garage. But based on handwriting samples and circumstantial evidence, he was arrested and convicted of attempted murder. Now here's the twist. Even while Paul Freshour sat in prison with no access to writing tools, no way to send mail, the letters kept coming. Some even showed up in his prison cell. One warned him to stop trying to prove his innocence, or things would get worse. So how could the letters continue if he was behind bars? Handwriting experts claimed he was the author, but others weren't so sure. Some believed Paul had been framed. Investigators dug up other leads, like a man seen near the site of the booby trap the day before it was found, someone who didn't match Paul's description at all. And there was more. People close to the case had ties to individuals who could have had the means and the motives to send those letters. There were rumors, secrets, vendettas. The deeper you went, the more it seemed like anyone could be behind it. After Paul was finally released, the letters slowly stopped. But no one was ever definitively proven to be the Circleville writer. To this day, no one knows the full truth. Was it Paul Freshour operating through someone else on the outside? Was it a coordinated effort? Or was Paul an innocent man silenced by someone with more power and more secrets? The Circleville Letters spanned decades. Hundreds of people received them. Some lives were ruined. One man died, and the writer still anonymous. The truth might still be out there, hidden in plain sight. There are moments in life where time just stops. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. A voice that didn't answer. A boy who didn't come back. A story that never got its ending. This is the story of Christopher Vigil. He was just 9 years old when he disappeared, bright-eyed, gentle, full of life. It was April 30th, 1978. Christopher, his mother Marion, and his younger brother were out on a hike in Poudre Canyon, Colorado. They picked a trail they hadn't been on before, Gray Rock Mountain Trail. It was supposed to be a relaxing day in nature, nothing more. At some point during the hike, Christopher asked his mom if he could walk ahead. He had seen some big boulders further along and wanted to explore. Marion said yes, under one condition, that they'd meet up at the spot together shortly after. So he went ahead, full of energy, running up the trail. That was the last time anyone saw him. When Marion and her younger son reached the meeting point, Christopher wasn't there. At first, she wasn't worried. Maybe he'd gotten a little further up. Maybe he'd circled back. But as the minutes passed, then an hour, then longer, worry turned into panic. She searched everywhere, called his name over and over, but the forest stayed quiet. There was no rustling, no movement, no sign of a child. Just trees, shadows, and silence. That night, the weather turned cold. A storm rolled in. Rain poured over the canyon, making visibility almost impossible. Somewhere out there, her little boy was alone, wet, scared, maybe hurt, or maybe already gone. The next morning, search crews arrived. Rangers, helicopters, volunteers, dogs. They came from everywhere. They combed the entire area. They searched for days, and then weeks. But Christopher was gone. There was no sign of struggle, no trail, no clue, just nothing. Over the years, there were sightings. People claiming they saw a boy who looked like him in other states, Arizona, Utah, Colorado Springs. But none of them ever led anywhere. Every hope ended in disappointment. Marion never stopped looking. She kept his memory alive. She followed every lead, clung to every glimmer of possibility. Because what else could a mother do? Christopher was the kind of kid who loved books. He liked exploring. He was quiet but curious. The kind of child who looked out for others, especially his little brother. He wasn't the type to wander off too far. He wasn't reckless. And that's what made his disappearance so haunting. It didn't make sense. It still doesn't. If he had fallen, they would have found something. If an animal had attacked, there would have been signs. But there was nothing. Just empty forest. A boy gone without a trace. Now, all these years later, Christopher would be a grown man. Maybe with children of his own. Maybe living a completely different life. Or maybe he's still somewhere out there in that canyon, part of the place that took him. We may never know what happened, but what we do know is this: he mattered. His story matters. And even though decades have passed, Christopher Vigil is not forgotten. Because when someone vanishes like that, the silence doesn't go away. It echoes. And sometimes, all you can do is keep listening. So, there was this family from Germany. A dad named Egbert, his girlfriend Cornelia, and their 2 young boys. Back in the summer of 1996, they flew all the way to Los Angeles for what should have been an amazing vacation in the U.S. They rented a van, did some sightseeing, and planned to visit Yosemite National Park. But instead of taking the usual routes, they decided to cut through Death Valley National Park, hoping to save some time. Now, Death Valley isn't just any desert. It's one of the hottest and most unforgiving places in America. Temperatures can soar above 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, and the terrain is rough and remote. On July 23rd, the family signed a visitor log saying they were heading over a nearby mountain pass. After that, nobody really knew what happened to them. Almost 3 months later, in late October, a park ranger flying overhead spotted their minivan stranded way out in the middle of nowhere. The van had 3 flat tires and was stuck in a place with no proper roads leading in or out. Inside, their camping gear was untouched, like they'd just vanished. A massive search effort kicked off. Hundreds of people combed the desert, but all they found was a single beer bottle and a spot where someone had rested under a bush. No sign of the family. Years went by, and then in 2009, 2 hikers decided to take another look in that canyon. They found skeletal remains of an adult man and woman, along with some personal belongings, things like passports and a journal. It was confirmed that the remains belonged to Egbert and most likely Cornelia. But the 2 boys? They were never found. Only a few possible fragments here and there, but nothing definitive. Most believe that the van got stuck and the family tried to hike out, probably aiming for a nearby military base. Maybe they thought it would be safe, like the secure places back home in Germany. But the desert heat, lack of water, and rugged terrain got the better of them. It's a heartbreaking story, how a fun family trip turned into a desperate fight for survival in one of the harshest places on Earth. And even now, decades later, the fate of those two children remains a mystery. You know how sometimes you just get a feeling that something bad is going to happen? That's exactly what happened to Cynthia "Cindy" Anderson. She was just 20 years old in 1981, working as a legal secretary in Toledo, Ohio. She was quiet, deeply religious, and kept to herself. But in the weeks before she vanished, Cindy started having these vivid, terrifying dreams. Nightmares, really, where someone would knock on her door, someone she knew and trusted, and then she'd be abducted and murdered. And what makes it all so unsettling is that it wasn't just a one-off dream. These nightmares were recurring, and Cindy told people about them. But it didn't stop there. One morning, she showed up at her law office and saw something spray-painted on a wall across the street. Huge letters reading, "I love you, Cindy," by G.W. She didn't know anyone with those initials. A week or two later, it appeared again, even bigger this time. And then came the phone calls. Anonymous, creepy, disturbing calls, right there at work. A client who was in the office once said he saw her answer the phone and turn absolutely white with fear. He said she looked terrified. Her bosses were worried enough that they had a panic button installed at her desk, and Cindy started keeping the doors locked in the morning until more people arrived. She was clearly scared. Then came August 4th, 1981. It was just like any other Tuesday. Cindy showed up for work around 8:30 a.m., just like always. A janitor saw her a little before 10 a.m., nothing out of the ordinary. But when her coworkers got back to the office around noon, Cindy was gone. The lights were on, the radio was playing, the door was locked, but there was no sign of her. No note, no struggle, no panic button pressed. Just silence. Her purse and car keys were gone, but her car was still in the lot, locked. And the weirdest part? On her desk was an open romance novel, turned to a scene where the main character is abducted at knife point. She had literally dreamed about something like this. Cindy never came back. Her bank account was untouched, her social security number never used again. It was like she just vanished off the face of the earth. A few weeks later, a woman called the police anonymously, whispering that Cindy was being held in the basement of a white house. She claimed the house was one of two, both owned by the same family. The parents were out of town, and the son was the one keeping Cindy there. Then the caller hung up and was never heard from again. Police searched the area, knocking on doors, but they never found anything. No matching house, no Cindy. And that graffiti? Turns out the guy who wrote it eventually came forward, said it was meant for a different Cindy. Total coincidence, apparently. His initials were GW? Sure, but police couldn't link him to Cindy Anderson's disappearance in any way. Over the years, a bunch of theories have popped up. Some think Cindy had a stalker, someone obsessed with her, calling her, watching her, building up to something terrible, and maybe he finally acted. Others believe Cindy may have overheard something she wasn't supposed to at work. See, the lawyer she worked for, Richard Neller, was later busted in a major drug trafficking case. One of his associates even told police years later that Cindy had been killed because she knew too much. But again, no evidence, just whispers. And then there's the possibility that she ran away. Cindy had a boyfriend and plans to go to Bible college. Maybe the pressure from her religious upbringing got to her, and she staged her own disappearance. But here's the thing, there's been no activity on any of her accounts in over 4 decades. Nothing. No calls, no sightings, no paper trail. Nothing to suggest she ever started a new life. One more theory, a serial killer. Around that same time, multiple women were abducted and murdered not far from where Cindy worked. The infamous Cook brothers, who were convicted of multiple homicides, were active around then. But they never admitted to hurting Cindy. And they never found her. Not her body, not her belongings, not even a shred of solid evidence pointing in one direction. Her father passed away still hoping she might walk through the door one day. He once said, "If she's out there, we want her to know we love her. The door is always open." Over 40 years later, that door is still open. But Cindy Anderson? She's still missing. And no one knows what really happened that day in August 1981.